I think that we need a Department for International Development at the heart of our international strategy. It's one of our proudest achievements in government to have set up DFID and to be on course to hit the 0.7% GDP target. And actually, we should take enormous credit from the fact that this government is also having to stick to that target. But I think DFID can make an enormous difference, not just in aid, but by promoting trade as well. Because we know that one of the biggest injustices we face in our world is the injustice facing the world's poorest countries in terms of trade. And DFID needs to be promoting the interests of some of the world's poorest countries in relation to trade. And also I saw at the Copenhagen summit the difference that DFID could make on climate change as well. And the truth is that all of these issues are now connected. So I'm for a DFID that is playing a central role in government, that is part of a vision of a fairer world, that is playing its part, as we did in government, to achieve the Millennium Development Goals. I am in favour of a Robin Hood tax, a financial transaction tax. I think that we saw from the banking crisis what irresponsibility meant and the impact that it had on all of our economies. We also know that actually, and the International Monetary Fund itself has said this, that the banking sector across the world can afford to pay a contribution, more of a contribution towards taxation. And I think it's very, very important that they do. So I support the campaign. I support the campaign for a financial transactions tax. I think we need to look here at home at the banking levy that was introduced, because the government brought in a banking levy of £2 billion and gave a lot of the money back in a corporation tax cut. And when we know there are difficult decisions to be made about spending and about taxation, I think it's right that the financial services sector pays its fair share. We've got to push as hard as we can, both in opposition and then back in government, for fair trading relationships and fairness to the developing world. Because we know that aid can make a difference to help people out of poverty, but actually trade is fantastically important as well. I'm sorry that actually we're seeing cuts in the DFID program to help some of the poorest countries of the world trade better and take advantage of the trading opportunities that there are. So restarting that round, getting trade talks moving is incredibly important. And again, this is about the obligations that the richest countries of the world owe to the poorest countries of the world, and we need to understand those obligations and act on them. I saw at the Copenhagen summit both the difficulties of reaching an agreement, but also what we could do if we acted together. We did get a Copenhagen agreement. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was an agreement that had China and India and the United States signed up. There are three things that we need to do. The first thing we need to do is we've always got to take action at home. One of the things that worries me most about this government is they've completely stopped talking about green issues. David Cameron talked about it a lot before the election as part of detoxifying the Tory brand. They've gone completely quiet on this agenda. We've got to take action at home. Secondly, we've got to honour our commitments made at Copenhagen to the world's poorest people in terms of aid to tackle the effects of climate change. We made a promise of $100 billion a year by 2020, as well as Fast Start finance to the poorest people of the world. We've got to make good on those promises for moral reasons, but also we will never get developing countries signed up to take action on climate change, and they need to be part of the solution unless we fulfill those obligations. And thirdly, we need to complete the unfinished business of Copenhagen and strive with all our might for an international treaty on climate change. I think that actually the Prime Minister here should have used the opportunity of the terrible crisis of the BP oil spill to make that case for the world shifting off oil and having an international climate change agreement and making progress. We need the most urgent action that we can on this issue, because it is the biggest political issue facing us, in the sense that when we think about the next generation, they will be asking in 10, 15 years' time, were you the last generation who failed to get the issue of climate change, or were you the first issue to get it? And that's got to be central, in my view, to our party going forward, and it will be central to my leadership. I saw myself in Bangladesh, visiting some of the people who live on the sandbanks of Bangladesh, the difference that our money can make. because these are people at the front line of climate change. And actually, by us simply putting in money to raise the physical level at which they were living, to raise up the huts in which they were living, we were going to protect them from future flooding when all but 4 homes in this encampment had been swept away in the past. And there are 2 million people in Bangladesh living on the sandbanks. So the plight of the world's poorest people always has to be a moral imperative for us as a political movement, and we're completely right to protect the investment that is going in. Now, what worries me about what the government is doing is that they are saying they're protecting aid funding, but there is evidence that they're going to start diverting this money elsewhere to other departments, maybe to the Foreign Office, maybe to the Ministry of Defence, maybe elsewhere. I think that would be a profound mistake if they did that. This is money which was put in place to help the world's poorest people, and it is about our moral responsibility, and they should never forget that. And also, I'm very worried to hear that they're talking about dropping the commitment to abolishing user fees for going to school, for example, or for the health service, for healthcare, in relation to the DFID policy. So what I fear is that we are seeing maintenance of some of the commitments on paper that we saw, but actually the spirit of those commitments is going to be undermined by what they are doing. And so you've got to commit to the 0.7%, but you've also got to do it upholding our moral responsibilities and our values of social justice and public services free at the point of use.